With the Atlanta Braves surprisingly deciding not to pick up the options on Tyler Kinley and Pierce Johnson, could they be cutting back spending once again, or are they perhaps setting up to spend big this offseason? We'll discuss that and much more on today's episode of Locked On Braves, so let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, and welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at ShortstopBall. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and you're watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button. With over 15,000 subscribers on YouTube, you can help others find us there as well. Just hit that thumbs up button and leave me a comment down below. You've been amazing on the podcast this past week or so on YouTube. Thank you so much for all the likes, shares, comments, so much that you've done to help us here on the podcast. If you're on the audio side, you get about 2. We still get the majority of our listeners over there. You can leave a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thanks so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. It's going to be a busy offseason, so make sure you're subscribed here to Locked On Braves. Make sure you become an everydayer here at Locked On Braves. Again, a ton of content coming your way. But today's episode, we got a lot of news to get to. We'll talk about the coaching changes. The Atlanta Braves plucking a couple of coaches from the New York Mets and Jeremy Hefner and Antoine Richardson. Really excited about those two guys. And in the first segment, we're going to talk about the news of the day because there was a lot of it. The option decisions, deciding not to pick up the options on Tyler Kinley and Pierce Johnson. What does that mean for this offseason? So we got so much to talk about on today's episode of Locked On Braves, which is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. So download the FanDuel app today. So we knew Thursday was going to be a big news day, kind of why I wanted to wait until Thursday to do another episode, although we did get some coaching decisions on Wednesday, which I'll talk about later. But you had the options, the deadline to pick up the options or decline options on Thursday, and didn't think there was going to be that much of a ruckus over it, but turns out it was. In fact, of the 5 that they had, they only picked up 2 of them. They picked up the $18 million option on Chris Sale and the $7 million option on Ozzie Albies, but they declined the $5.5 million option on Tyler Kinley, had to pay him $750,000 buyout to do so, and they declined the $7 million option on Pierce Johnson, giving him $250,000. They also declined the David Fletcher $8 million team option with a $1.5 million buyout on that one. It's just, be done with it. It's over with. You look at it and what the Braves were able to save today, and they saved around $18 million when you consider the buyout money included in that. And that's a good bit of cost savings. Now, what are you going to do with it? We'll talk about that later on. But just looking at these individually, the Sale one was obvious. You knew that was going to come back. I mean, when he's healthy, he's looked like a Cy Young contender. That's an easy option at $18 million, even though there are certainly the injury concerns and risk with Chris Sale. For Ozzie Albies, look, even if you don't believe in Ozzie, and even if you believe he's on a decline, it's still $7 million, and the buyout was $4 million. So you're only going to save $3 million. It's worth it just to pick up the option, and one hopes that Ozzie Albies can turn things around. And if he doesn't, it's still not the end of the world at $7 million. And plus, if you did decline it, you got another hole that you have to fill this offseason. So I thought that one's a no-brainer too, even after the year that Ozzie had, ending another year injured. You know, he did end the season on a good note after it seemed like maybe that wrist finally got healthy, but then unfortunately another injury to the hand. But again, you weren't saving a ton there, and it would have created another hole that you had to fill in the offseason. The Fletcher one was an easy decision, one of the easiest decisions that a GM can make. Just a dead salary player you could never use. And so that was an easy one there. I just wonder, though, if David Fletcher was still a good big league player, how much swifter and louder the action would have been for Major League Baseball on him. But the fact that he was, relegated to the minor leagues, Double-A, pitching even, it's just a crazy situation. You figured out the Ohtani situation in 2 weeks, but at least as far as I know, and I searched everywhere, I can't find anything on David Fletcher and his ties with using the same bookie that Shohei's interpreter was. So it's just wild. But again, Fletcher's a no-name baseball player at this point. He was out of sight, out of mind, and he was definitely out of Major League Baseball sight and mind. Now, the final two that we'll get into here, Tyler Kinely and Pierce Johnson. Both of these were a bit surprising. Pierce Johnson one, maybe not quite as much. I've talked about it, really the past year. I talked about it last offseason too. I don't know how long that fastball curveball combination can continue as a reliever. Granted, he does throw hard and maybe should throw that fastball a little bit more. But also the strikeout rate had dipped for Pierce Johnson the last 2 years, although the walk rate did get better this past year. Last year was actually the best expected ERA that he's had since 2022. I've had my concerns with him, but again, it's still a guy that's pretty solid. I mean, in a good bullpen, he's your fourth, fifth, sixth best guy. And at $7 million, I think that's a pretty fine value. But the Braves didn't feel that way. And they felt like it was, time to move on from Pierce Johnson. And again, this guy, he can be brought back. Both of these guys can be. But at least at that $7 million mark, even with the $250,000 buyout, the Braves felt like that was too much for Pierce Johnson. Kinely is the one that really surprises me. I did not see this one happening at all. And part of this is just because you trade for this guy at the deadline. Clearly, you see something in him in a season that was dead. You're out of it by the end of July. You know that, but you still trade for this guy anyway. It's not like you gave up much for him, but you did trade for him because you saw something in him. He comes here and he's completely dominant. And not only that, he gets better and better the more that he's here. And it just felt like a no-brainer that you were going to pick up that option at $5.5 million. Because even if he's not as good, even if he's not a sub-1 ERA guy like he was after coming over, $5.5 million for, again, a guy that's your fifth, sixth, seventh reliever is not terrible. And so this one just did not make sense at all to me, why you would not pick up that option after, one, you traded for him, two, you saw something in him to trade for him, and three, whatever you saw must have worked because he was fantastic when he came over, and he finally got that walk rate down. I just don't understand this one at all. At the end of the day, these are both mid-30s relievers, again, fifth, sixth, seventh best bullpen arms in a good bullpen. And Tyler Kinely, he's 34. He has a career strikeout rate of 23.8, a career walk rate of 11.1. I don't know that he'll get more than a 1-year, $5 million deal on the open market. But I thought that was, pretty decent value for a guy that was fantastic in Atlanta. And again, I just don't know why you trade for him to see what he can do. He does great things, and then you don't pick up the option. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, but it's not worth losing a ton of sleep over. Because like I said, both of these guys in good bullpens are probably, at best your fourth best bullpen arm. So again, it's head scratching just because these felt like pretty moderate deals, what you were going to be paying these guys, $7 million, $5.5 million. If you try to replace these guys on the open market, you'd be hard pressed to find guys much better than they are for that price. Maybe you can, sign a guy on a $2-3 million deal and get the same type of value. Relief pitchers are finicky year to year. I say that all the time. So there's certainly the possibility that you go out and you can get somebody on a 1-year, $2 million, $3 million deal, which is going to be cheaper, and they can be just as good as these guys. That's not out of the realm of possibility. I understand that. But you already had these guys. You knew what you had in them, and it's not like they were making a ton of money. So, again, just optically, it doesn't make sense. I don't think it's worth, getting too upset about just because of who they ultimately are. They're ultimately fourth, fifth, sixth best guys in a bullpen, and those can be replaced and hopefully be replaced at a lower value. Otherwise, I don't know why you would do this. All right, next, we'll get into some of the other news of the day. You had some players getting added back to the 40-man roster, some guys who were outrighted to make room on the 40-man. I'll also talk about the payroll and what these moves might mean for the Atlanta Braves this offseason. We'll get into all that here next. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss out the start of the game, want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. You can check out FanDuel.com right now to get the odds for the 2026 World Series, where the Braves still have the eighth best odds, tied with the Padres at plus 2,000s, behind the Phillies and the Mets, which is interesting there. You can check out the odds for the NBA Finals as well, where the Oklahoma City Thunder are a huge favorite there. They have the NBA Cup odds as well, where the Hawks have a little bit better odds than they do overall on the season, but you can see all that at FanDuel.com. Also, please make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. Right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Braves your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On MLB for your second listen of the day. Slowly getting caught up on all the action happening around Major League Baseball. Big news day on Thursday, as we're talking about here for the Brave side of things. But that was happening all around Major League Baseball. And you can catch up with all that over at Locked On MLB. We'll have one more episode here this week. We'll have our mailbag episode on Friday afternoon. Look for a post from Locked On_Braves on X on Friday morning. Submit your question to that post to be answered on Friday afternoon's mailbag podcast. Make sure you join me for that if you can. Getting back into the news of the day, though, you had some reinstatements, some guys who were on the 60-day IL that had to be added back to the roster. That included, it's funny to, not funny, but it's sad actually to sit back and look at how many guys the Braves had on the 60-day IL to end the season. You had Ozzie Albies, Aaron Bummer, Jake Fraley, Daysbel Hernandez, Grant Holmes, Joe Jimenez, Ronaldo Lopez, Sean Murphy, Austin Riley, Spencer Schwellenbach, and AJ Smith-Shawver. That's 11 guys that they had to get back from the 60-day IL and add them to the 40-man roster for the offseason. Now, one of those guys is already gone. Jake Fraley was claimed off waivers by the Rays. So 10 guys added back to the 40-man roster. Some of those some pretty key pieces. Now, they did outright 4 guys as well in Austin Cox, Joel Payamps, Chucky Robinson, and Carlos Rodriguez. Payamps and Robinson can elect free agency. Cox and C-Rod will go back to Gwinnett and stay in the system. I'm glad to hear that for C-Rod, kind of a 4th, 5th outfielder guy. So glad to be able to retain him in the system. The 40-man roster is now at 34, I believe. I had written down 35, but I think that was before the Jake Fraley news. So I think they're actually at 34 now. They're likely going to have to add a couple of prospects to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. And obviously, they're going to have to add some pieces at some point this offseason. Now that you didn't bring back Tyler Kinely, you didn't bring back Pierce Johnson, you're going to replace those guys. You got to replace Iglesias. You got to replace Ozuna. You need a shortstop. There's a lot of spots on this roster that are going to have to be filled in this offseason. Now, with that in mind, you take a look at FanGraphs right now and look at the payroll, and they have the Atlanta Braves at around $190 million committed to the luxury tax threshold for this upcoming season, and the team payroll at around $200 million. So both of those sitting at around $200 million. The team payroll is actually higher than the luxury tax payroll. Actually, updated numbers here, and the estimated team payroll is just under $200 million at the moment, and the estimated luxury tax they have at $191 million. So about a $10 million difference there, again, according to FanGraphs at the moment, which means, again, we don't know how much the Braves are going to spend. We know the third threshold, which they've been to before, $280 million, would lead you to believe they have a lot of money to spend. But that's just a luxury tax threshold, not the team payroll, which again is higher now than the luxury tax payroll for the Braves. But I would assume, somewhat conservatively, I hope, that there's 40 to 50 million to spend this offseason. And maybe that seems like a lot, but it's really not. I mean, you sign one free agent to a $20 million deal, and that's nearly half your money to spend this offseason. And I just mentioned all the holes that they have to fill at shortstop, at least 2 spots in the bullpen, shortstop. You got to do something there. I would love to get somebody in the rotation. I would love to get a big bat. That 40 or 50 million can go real quick. So again, there's a lot of money, but there's also a lot of holes that need to be filled this offseason. So kind of leads me to the point that I wanted to get to after these moves today, cutting or not picking up the options on Kinely or Pierce Johnson. What does that mean for this offseason? What does that mean for Alex Anthopoulos in the front office and how aggressive they're going to be and how much money they have to spend? Now, at this point, it is all just pure speculation. So I'm going to give you a few possible scenarios. I think it's one of four scenarios here with this news today. You can all go with whichever direction you want to go with it. You can be pessimistic. You can be optimistic. You can kind of sit in the middle. But this news today is going to mean one of four things. The first one is, and this is the most pessimistic view, the first one is they want to stay under the tax again and or they don't have a ton of money to spend this offseason. I don't want to believe that because you got under the tax last offseason, and I said all last offseason, you want to do that, that's fine. You better come back and spend big this offseason. But that's possibility number one, that they cut these guys. They didn't pick up their options because they want to cut payroll. They want to stay under the tax, and maybe they don't have as much money as we think, or I think, that they can spend this offseason. Number two is that they realize there are more expensive holes to fill. Shortstop, DH, starting pitcher, and those need to be addressed, and they want to make sure that they have the assets that they need to be able to address those spots before worrying about the bullpen. Look, the bullpen is a big area of need this offseason. There is no doubt about that. You cannot go into the season again like you did last year with a makeshift bullpen, signing all these guys to minor league deals, hoping that they figure it out. You cannot do that again. And you cannot just count on these young guys like Daysville, like Lara, like Hayden Harris. I would have loved to see more of them at the end of last year to know what we had, but now I don't. So I can't count on them going into the season. And so you do have to address the bullpen. But those guys are less expensive than a shortstop, a big bat for the DH, and a starting pitcher. So maybe option number two, they're just getting their assets, getting enough money so that they can address some of the bigger moves, and then they will address the bullpen after all that is taken care of. That's option number two. Number three is they plan to spend huge this offseason and feel they can easily spend or trade to replace the guys who probably would have been your fifth and sixth relievers in a good bullpen. That's the very optimistic view here, is number three, is that they got a ton of money to spend. They feel like they can use that money to do better and upgrade from Pierce Johnson and Tyler Kinely, who, again, in a good bullpen are probably your fourth, fifth, sixth best relievers. That's the very optimistic view of what happened here today. And then the fourth one is they plan to just sign these guys back at lower rates. I don't know that I necessarily buy that, especially with Kinely, because you had to pay him $750K. You're only saving about $4.5 million by declining his option. And so I don't know that I buy that. Maybe they feel like they can get Tyler Kinely on a $2-3 million deal. I don't know. But that's option number four, is that they plan to sign either one or either of these guys back at a lower cost. And they feel like they can do that. Or like I said earlier, they can replace these guys for similar, lesser value, or that they can upgrade these guys. So those are your four options with what we have today and the information we have to go off on. One is they are cutting costs again. They want to stay under the luxury tax. They don't have as much money as we think. Number two, they realize there's more expensive holes that need to be fixed first, and they want to have as much money as possible to free up so that they can address those positions: shortstop, DH, starting pitcher. Number three, they got plenty of money to spend, and they feel like they can replace a Kinely. They feel like they can replace a Pierce Johnson and upgrade those spots. That's the optimistic view. And then the fourth one is maybe they just plan to renegotiate and sign these guys on lesser deals. Those are your four scenarios. And I don't know which one they're going. Nobody does. Nobody knows that yet. Again, pick whichever path you want. I'm going to try to choose the optimistic one, though, in that they got plenty of money to spend. But I think if I had to pick, it's probably a little bit in the middle of these. I don't think they're going to spend money wildly, but I do think they have a good bit of money to spend. And I think they're going to address bullpen. I just think they have to they got to get shortstop addressed first. And then they got to have enough ammunition to make sure that they can sign Ha-Seong Kim and keep him. Although I would not go much beyond $20 million a year, if go over $20 million a year at all. but I think they need to make sure they have enough money to get that done. I think they need to have enough money that if something comes up for a big bat, to replace the DH spot, that they have money to fill that. They have money to get depth at starting pitcher. A lot of this too, another thing too that plays into this we haven't talked about yet is what is the plan for Ronaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes? We really don't know yet. Talked about Ronaldo Lopez. Sounds like maybe he could go back to a starter. Grant Holmes still kind of up in the air. Those two play a big role in how this offseason pans out and where they're going to be next year. Because if you can say, oh, we'll move both of them to the bullpen. Well, okay, then suddenly you've already replaced Kinely and Johnson with maybe two better guys, and Ronaldo Lopez and Grant Holmes. But then you still really have a hole you need to fill in the rotation. So what happens with those two guys also plays a lot into how this offseason unfolds. But let me know your thoughts. What did you make of these moves today? Are you taking the pessimistic route? Do you think they're trying to cut money again and they're not going to be able to spend as much? Are you taking the optimistic route and thinking they're just trying to gather all their assets together so they can spend big this offseason? Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. All right, next, I want to get into the coaching hires because they hired two really exciting guys, maybe going a little bit younger, maybe going a little bit more analytically driven with Hefner and Richardson. We'll get into those two guys in detail here next. This episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the daily fantasy app where making the right call can actually pay off. You and I make decisions every day, but on PrizePicks, being right means cashing in. With football back, NBA here as well, PrizePicks is the simplest and fastest way to get in on the action. All you got to do is just pick more or less on 2 to 6 player projections, and you can turn your takes into real prizes all in less than 60 seconds. And if you have issues controlling the way you game, visit prizepicks.com/help-center/responsible-gaming for tips on how to practice responsible gaming. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONMLB to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONMLB for $50 in lineups after your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, it's good to be right. Excuse me there. As we come back, I want to finish up here. I want to go into detail on the two coaching hires from the other day. Jeremy Hefner, Antoine Richardson. Both of these guys were with the Mets last year. Now both of them are with the Braves. And I posted this on social media. Ryan Finkelstein, host of Locked On Mets, did a great job kind of breaking this down from the Mets point of view. If you want to go give that a listen, he gives some great detail on both of these guys and what happened, why they're not back with the Mets. So I very much encourage you to go give that a listen. I did also just ask him specifically about both of these guys. And Ryan said, Hefner, it was maybe just both sides deciding it was time to move on. He's been with the team since 19, outlasted several front office regime changes and managers, but they felt like it was time to get new voices in the room. For Richardson, they wanted him back, but I guess they couldn't come to terms on his salary. The Mets were the most efficient base stealing team ever, so he's very good at his job. But Braves got some good ones. So that coming from the host of Locked On Mets, who very insightful and very encouraging for what the Braves were getting here with Hefner, who is 39, drafted by the Mets twice, but declined both times and went back into the draft the following year and was taken by the Padres. After spending 5 years in the Padres system, the Mets finally got him, plucking him off of waivers. He pitched for parts of 2 seasons with the Mets in 12 and 13 as a starter and reliever with a 4.65 ERA and 224 1/3 innings. Spent another year in the Mets system and then ended things in 2016 in the Cardinals system. When he was hired on by the Mets, he was considered to be a rising analytical mind. In 2019, when he was hired as the Mets pitching coach, before that, he was an advanced scout for the Twins for 2 years and then was promoted to assistant pitching coach. So that's his coaching background. In 6 years with the Mets from 20-25, this team was 11th in ERA, 1 spot behind the Braves, 16th in WHIP, 10th in batting average, 7th in strikeout rate, and 23rd in walk rate. The Braves had better numbers in all of those categories from 20-25. Look, Craney was great. Craney is fantastic. I've said all along, he was the one guy that I definitely would have wanted to keep on this staff. But I also understand the move. We'll see what happens with Craney. I know he had some family health issues this past year that caused him to miss some time. Maybe he just wants to hang it up. He's 67 years old. And maybe Craney just wanted to step away as well. It sounded like, according to Mark Bowman of MLB.com, that the Braves were planning to bring him back until Hefner became available. But again, Cranny was great, fantastic. I think it's kind of similar to Sites the year before that. I don't necessarily blame Sites for what happened in 2024, but maybe it was just time for a new voice. And maybe that's the case here with Cranny too. It's just time for a new voice. I think it's also a shift to get some more analytically minded people in the system. Maybe AA didn't quite get to pick the new age, highly analytical manager that he wanted. Speculation, not reporting that or anything. But maybe he is getting to do that with the coaches behind Walt Weiss. I think Hefner is definitely that. He was considered one of the best pitching coaches in the game after the 2024 season when he helped revitalize the careers of Sean Manaea and Luis Severino. This year it seemed to be trending in that same direction with Griffin Canning, Tyler McGill, but both of those guys got injured, but they were having great starts to their season. He also helped build a pitching lab for the Mets in their spring training complex. So again, it's a younger guy, analytically driven, has had really good success with the Mets. So I'm excited to see what he can do with this Braves pitching staff. But maybe the one that I'm most excited about, if you're an everydayer, you know what I mean here. And that's new first base coach, Antoine Richardson, 42 years old. He was drafted 4 times. We just don't see this as much nowadays, players being drafted 3-4 times. Twice by the Orioles, eventually was drafted and signed by the Giants, remained in their organization for 5 years. Braves actually picked him up in 2010 as a pinch runner. He played in just 9 games, only had 1 stolen base attempt that was successful. Got another cup of coffee in 2014 with the Yankees, stole 5 bags for them without getting caught in 13 games. Overall, in his minor league career of 12 seasons, he stole 331 bases, so about 30 steals a year. He had 5 years of 30 or more steals, 8 years of 20 or more steals with a high of 66 back in 2006 when he was in A-ball. He also hung things up in 2016, just like Hefner. His first coaching role came in 2019 as a minor league outfield instructor for the Giants. He then became the first base coach for 4 years before becoming the Mets first base coach in 2024. Now, looking at the numbers, stolen base numbers, and this is all player dependent, as are the pitching numbers that I talked about earlier for Hefner. A lot of it's player dependent. You got the right players, with the right speed, or on the pitching side, you have great pitchers. It's going to help your numbers. The Giants had the second fewest stolen bases while Richardson was there. They had 206 steals and 260 attempts for a 79% stolen base percent completion, successful stolen base percentage. Now, keep in mind, during this time, the rules gradually changed to improve stolen bases. In his 2 years with the Mets, they ranked 11th in stolen bases with 253 swipes and 293 attempts for an 86% successful rate. But he really put himself on the map this past year in 2025, helping the Mets finish 5th overall in stolen bases, and they set a major league record in stolen base percentage at 89%. Juan Soto led the team with 38 stolen bases. Lindor also had 31, so had 2 30 stolen base guys last year. The Braves have the 5th fewest steals in 2025 with just 82, and a stolen base percentage, a successful percentage, I don't know how to say that, I know I'm not saying it the right way, of just 77%. The team average for overall in baseball was 80.2%. The average in 2024 was 78.4%. So the Braves below average in their success rate. Again, if you're an everydayer, how much I can't stand how awful the Braves are at stealing bases. And I feel like they have so many guys that should be good at it. I feel like Michael Harris should be an easy 20 stolen base a year guy. Ozzie should be an easy 20 stolen base a year guy. Obviously, Acuna being injured hurts their numbers a lot. But I feel like they have some guys on here that should have some speed. Even Profar. I know it's not a great speed, but I feel like he's somebody that can steal 20 bags a year. If you're able to get Hassan Kim back, that's another guy that can steal 20 a year. So they have the potential and the guys, depending on who they bring in, to really make use of the new rules for steals. And now you get a guy in Richardson who helped the Mets do that. If he can help the Braves do that, that would be fantastic. It's also a little bit of drama in the way that Richardson left the Mets. Apparently, after his big year, he wanted a raise to be compensated. Mets made him an offer. It didn't meet his demands. So he kind of shopped himself out there. Couldn't find anything better. Went back to the Mets, but that deal wasn't there anymore. So Braves swooped in and got him. And there's an article by Mike Puma, but you can go and read that if you want to. Or like I said, and Ryan's podcast on Locked On Mets, he goes into great detail about that as well. But I'm very excited about both of these hires. Again, you're getting some age behind a veteran guy like Walt Weiss. And I think that's exactly what you want. And you want, like I said, I want that old school mentality, but I want it mixed with some new age data, analytics that use both of them. And I think this is a great mix of that. We'll see who the hitting coach is going to be, the pitch coach, and all of that as they round out the staff. But I'm very excited in these two hires. But let me know what you think in the comments section below. Quickly getting to some other news here. Nacho Alvarez and Luke Sennard made the Fall Stars team. That'll be played on Sunday night at 8 p.m. Eastern. I saw it was on MLB.com. I don't know if it's on MLB Network or not. I don't know what else they'd be showing right now. The Braves also claimed outfielder Michael Ciani, 26-year-old left-handed hitter. It does have one minor league option left, which is nice. Career 64 WRC plus, so not much with the bat, but can play center field and has speed. So it's a backup option there for Michael Harrison center. And then some news around Major League Baseball. The Padres with a bit of a surprise hire in Craig Stammen to be their coach. The Rays declined an $11 million team option for Pete Fairbanks. So that's another option in free agency now for the Braves. We had talked about maybe trading for him, but now you can just go get him in free agency. And then players who received qualifying offers. So keep these guys in mind. If you think the Braves should go after one of these guys, you'll now have to give up a pick for them. But if the Braves get that extra pick with Drake Baldwin, might not hurt quite as much this year. But Bo Bichette, Dylan Cease, Edwin Diaz, Zach Gallen, I really hated that he got one. Trent Grisham, Shota Imanaga, Michael King, I hate that he got one. Kyle Schwarber, Suarez as well, Torres, Gleyber Torres, Kyle Tucker, Valdez, and what was a little surprised that Brandon Woodruff got one from the Brewers, who just penny pinched William Contreras out of $12 million. Not really, he'll just go to arbitration now, but a penny pitching franchise like the Brewers gave a qualifying offer to Brandon Woodruff because that qualifying offer is $22 million for 1 year. I would not be surprised if Woodruff accepts that. So a notable player that did not get one that the Braves could go after is Robert Suarez, a reliever there. I think he and Iggy are in kind of the same boat. Both have really good closer experience, not at the top of the closer market or ranks, but I think both those guys are very similar. Could come in, make a $10, $12 million a year and be some closer options for you. So I wouldn't mind that either. So that's your news of the day. A lot to get to. Going to be a lot coming up in the next week or so as free agency is now officially underway for all teams. It's not like other sports, though. There's not going to be a mad rush to sign some of these players, but we will get a lot of news and stuff coming out here. GM meetings, I think, are happening next week. So usually get some discussion started on that as well. So make sure you subscribe here to Locked On Braves, wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining me here today. We got over 200 people in here live. So thank you so much for joining. Rockaton in here, Stephen P, Pardon, E. Fuentes and Everydayer, Jeffrey Humphreys too in here. Thank you so much for joining me live on today's episode. PJ's Braves, AA, Andrew Chandler, Gene Gordy. Appreciate you all joining live, being active in the comments section. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcast. We will talk to you next time.